When does a phone company stop being a phone company? There are some people that say AT&T and the NSA are virtually indistinguishable at this point. And a lot of other people just think it's their cell phone and internet provider, and that's it. There are some pretty large, lucrative contracts between the NSA and AT&T. But how far does it really go? Back in 2006, it came out that there were secret rooms that the NSA had built, black rooms, inside of what was alleged to be several AT&T locations along the West Coast. The most well-known of these is room 641A in the San Francisco office at the SBC Communications Building at 611 Folsom Street in San Francisco, which was known in internal AT&T documents as the Study Group 3 Secure Room. It's fed by fiber optic lines from beam splitters installed in fiber optic trunks carrying internet backbone traffic, which gives the NSA the capability to enable surveillance and analysis of internet content on a massive scale, including both overseas and purely domestic traffic. After that came out, you had NSA whistleblower William Binney come out and say there were 10 to 20 such black room facilities installed throughout the United States. And I guess it shouldn't be too much of a surprise. I wrote this article back in 2015. In 1975, it actually came out that the NSA was spying on telegrams coming through the Western Union International office in New York City via a copier machine they had set up. And it didn't stop until the executive vice president for operations of Western Union International asked the guy who was coming in to service it one of these times, was he authorized to have that machine there? And he said he wanted a letter proving he had the right to put it there. Guy took the machine and never came back. But executives and politicians, they don't ask questions like that these days. Just this past November, it came out, there are whole buildings that are basically leading double lives. One such building is known as Project X, or better known as Titan Point. This came out just this past November. For decades, nobody knew what was going on inside this building because, as you can clearly see, there's no windows. It's a very ominous looking structure. But everyone in New York City just knew it as the AT&T Long Lines Building, which they started building in 1969 and didn't finish it until 1974. Documents have since come out, and it's now been revealed that this building is also one of the most important National Security Agency surveillance sites on U.S. soil, a covert monitoring hub that's used to tap into phone calls, faxes, and internet data. They said there was one story that came out about the AT&T Long Lines Building back in '94, this story in the New York Times, which talked about it as being part of AT&T's worldwide intelligent network, and that if the nation's foe's system is the human body, this building is its nervous system. But once this came out, the question was quickly raised, how many of these buildings are there? How many locations like this are there across the country? Because if you start taking a look at AT&T buildings, you will find a lot of these tall, windowless structures in major cities throughout the country, of which people know very, very little. And Jeff Parrott, a reporter for the South Bend Tribune, was wondering about the one in their city, which no one seemed to know anything about. They have a building that looks kind of almost like a mini Long Lines building there. He contacted Tamara Rader for AT&T Media Relations Indiana, and she wrote back and said, our buildings house some administrative offices and various electronic equipment. Unfortunately, we're unable to do a tour at this time. So then he wrote back and said, could he at least have an interview with someone? And she wrote back and said, don't have anything further to provide for this. So then he reached out to a local government official who said he wasn't sure what's in the building, and out of respect for their security concerns, we never ask. So the government officials, they don't ask. They don't ask any questions. Was it okay for me to quote him saying that? No. They did a whole add-on to this building and made it look a lot like the other building back in the 70s when the Long Lines building was being built. This kind of building was being built all over the place. When I was telling Aaron about this, we just so happened to be on the road at the time. This was back in January. We were driving through Birmingham, and we decided to just head over while we were driving through and take a look at the AT&T building in Birmingham. And sure enough, you got another one of these big, tall, windowless structures covered in eye-in-the-sky cameras. And we got out of the car and filmed it a little bit and talked about it.
And meanwhile, they've got a display of those water cannons they blasted at people who did civil rights marches in the 60s here in Birmingham, which is also just screwed up. So you got civil rights violations all over the place, I guess.
Thinking, well, maybe we'll do a video just asking this question. I hadn't gotten around to it until now, but what was really interesting about it is we were only there for about 5 minutes. This is just supposed to be some AT&T building. There's no windows anyways. It's not like you're going to see anything. We get back in the car and start to leave. Out of the attached parking garage pulls a guy in a black unmarked SUV with tinted windows, and he's got something in the front of his car that looks like a telephoto lens maybe. I don't know. By the time I was not recording at that time, and by the time we saw him and we saw this thing, I only was able to capture a few seconds of it, and then we just got out of there. We left. But it gave me the creeps. I definitely got the feeling it was a lot more than just your local telephone company. And the question remains, how far does this go? People are starting to ask questions everywhere. Here's a guy saying, what's up with the ominous windowless building in downtown Kalamazoo? Even he says in here, if it's nothing more than boring switches, why not allow a newspaper reporter to satiate his curiosity? I mean, why won't they even just invite him down to a conference room in the downstairs part and, let him do a fluff piece? If there's nothing to it, why the hush-hush? The question isn't just how many buildings did they build for this purpose, because it's obviously hard to believe it's just this one in New York and that one room in San Francisco. The real question is, was AT&T ever just a phone company?